we are discussing the properties of turbulent flow. So, mixing of parcels of fluid having different velocities. Now, what will happen that when your parcels are moving from one place to another place, because they are jumping from one place to another place, the velocities and all other properties are much different. Okay, then when they have different velocities, they go and mix there. What happens is, while momentum remains conserved, total kinetic energy of the ensemble reduces. So when you have two these parcel mixing together, what will happen? The momentum will remain conserved. We are assuming that there are no external forces. Of course, when you have a fluid, there will be external forces, and the kinetic energy would reduce. Right? And the kinetic energy lost is converted into thermal energy due to viscosity. So this is what happens. So your momentum becomes more important, and kinetic energy gets dissipated into heat, or it gets converted into internal energy. Now that is not exactly that happens, because external forces are there. Okay, so but you can see what is this is happening. Okay, then mixing is a dissipative process. So this is what dissipated means, that energy get dissipated. The lost energy is irreversibly converted to internal energy. This is what happens. Okay, then both mixing and heat transfer increase by order of magnitude. This we were talking about, that there is a very large increase in the. So if you talk about mixing in terms of laminar flow, and on the other hand turbulent flow, you will find that the mixing, that means the species distribution, concentration distribution of species, that is what the mixing is. Two different types of particles are there and they mix up, so their concentration becomes uniform, right? Suppose here you have a higher concentration of carbon dioxide, on the other side you have a higher concentration of oxygen. When they mix, they will equalize. Okay, and similarly heat transfer will also take place. One is hot, the other is cold, and heat transfer is taking place. What is observed in case of turbulent flow is, as compared to the laminar flow, this order of mixing and the order of heat transfer, they are manifold. Okay, then we continue with this. Okay, then these turbulent flows contains both deterministic and random events. Now what happens is, from where the turbulence starts, that is a particular, you can say, fixed structure. So the same type of motion will generate from there, because you have same fluid impinging on the same you can say top type of surface, or the same type of change in surface. So the same type of structure of the turbulence is formed, vortices formed, but as it proceeds, okay, it becomes more and more random. So you have both these deterministic as well as random events. Repeatable deterministic structures are the ones that originate from fixed causes. So if the cause is fixed and the conditions are fixed, so the generation will be same, right? Disturbance का generation भी same ही होगा पे. As the source of disturbance is fixed, the disturbance itself is deterministic. Okay, so the first determinant is fixed. But then what happens is, However, as these structures move on and dissipate, they pick up randomness, because dissipation is a random phenomenon. Now, so if some particle parcel has picked up the velocity, okay, you will find that normally it will go in the same direction, but after that, when it mixes, it's going to split, right? That pattern will be different. Okay, so randomness comes from there. It is the random nature of flow structures that differ from each other in size, strength, and time interval between their occurrences, which makes the study of them very difficult. Now, had it been that you have a disturbance which is of a deterministic nature, things would have been easier. But it is their dissipation which goes along after they are generated in a deterministic way. They take up a random character, which makes it difficult to study them. Okay. Now, then the effects produced by turbulence may not be desirable depending upon the application. Okay. So, it depends. Sometimes turbulence is desirable, sometimes it is not desirable. Intense mixing is useful when chemical mixing or heat transfer is needed. Now, if you are looking for heat transfer, or if you are looking for a chemical process in which you want a mixing, then this turbulent flows are better, because they give you high order of mixing and high order of heat transfer. Okay. On the other hand, increased mixing results in increased viscous losses. Now, mixing means you are having parcels of different velocities, they are mixing, right, and they are violently mixing. As a result, what happens? There is a loss of kinetic energy, and then increasing power required to pump a fluid. So that means viscous forces come into play, kinetic energy loss is significant, and your pressure loss also takes place. Okay. So an increase to propel a vehicle, okay, an increase by an order of magnitude is not unusual. So what will happen compared to the turbulent this laminar flow? In turbulent flow you will find that pressure drops are very high. Now, if you are looking for saving on the pressure work or the pump work, then you have to require that turbulence is less. But if you are looking for heat transfer and chemical mixing, you will like that turbulence is more. So it is both useful as well as detrimental, both. Now we come to what are the issues which are related to turbulence. Now, first is that real life problems involve turbulence. We talked about this, that in the real life you come across turbulence too often, so it cannot be ignored, you cannot ignore it. And the fluid properties such as viscosity, thermal diffusivity of turbulent flows are much different than that of laminar flow. Therefore, turbulent flows cannot be approximated by laminar flow. So the turbulent flows, the study of turbulent flows cannot be avoided. So two things are happening. One is that they are quite different from laminar flow. Their properties are very different, significantly different. And the second thing is they are very common. So in a nutshell, what we come to the conclusion that we have to study it. We have to find solution to solve the turbulent flow. Okay, we cannot escape this. Now we talk about next point is scale of turbulence. We'll know what it is as we proceed. Now turbulent flows fluctuate on a broad range of length and time scales. Okay, which means that they have different sizes and different speeds. Time scales means their rotational velocities are different, and length means their sizes are different. Okay, a typical flow domain having a volume of now we are talking about a volume of 0.1 meter by 0.1 meter 0.1 meter. That means 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter, right? As small as that. With a high Reynolds number, the turbulent flow might contain eddies down to 10 to 100 micrometer. That could be the size of the eddies. So the size of the if the Reynolds number is high, you can go up to eddies of 10 micrometer. Now 10 micrometer means that in order to describe the flow process at all length scales, we would require mesh of this size. If you want to capture an eddy which is of 10 micrometer size, you will have to make these many cells, 10 raised to power 9 to 10 raised to power 12. So this is for 10 micrometer and this is for 100 micrometer. If the size of eddy is 100 micrometer, your grid size has to be 10 raised to power 9 of that order, and 10 raised to power 9 means 1 billion, which means 100 crores. And 10 raised to 12 is too high. Okay, so we'll just discuss that why do we want to reduce the size of the grid, why this requirement is there. What I am saying is here that because the eddy size is small, you have to reduce the size of the grid. That means the number of cells will increase. Why? I'll talk later on. But this you at the moment you can remember this, that the number of cells would increase. Now the fastest events can take place with a frequency of 10 kilohertz. Now those vortices are rotating, right, and with a frequency of 10 kilohertz, which would mean that we should discretize the time step of 100 microsecond or 10 raised to power for each second of flow. Now if you want to pick up a rotation, right, which is repeating itself in 100 microseconds, to understand that you have to go lower than that. Otherwise what will happen? You are going to see the same thing. What is happening within those 100 microseconds you don't know. Are you getting? Something is changing and coming back to the same state within 100 microseconds. Now if you want to know what happened in between, you have to be going in between. No? You have to break. This you can understand from this. Suppose these are two grid cells, right? These are grid cells. Now this is a vertex. I have this vertex and this is the size of my grid cell. Now remember that when you do the CFD simulations, each cell has only one velocity. Okay, for all the parameters you have only one value. If I want to give one value to this, this will be 0. If I find the average velocity in this cell, it will be 0, because the fluid is rotating all around. What does that mean? You are finding that velocity is 0, but actually velocity is not 0. Then there is an option available to you. You break it into 4 parts, like this, right? 4 parts. Now, when you study this cell, the average velocity will be this. You study this cell, average velocity will be this. So now you have broken the cell into 4 parts, and you are getting velocity at each. It is giving you some idea that okay, the fluid is moving in this direction, in this, right? What does that mean? That your grid size should be always smaller than the smallest vortex. Same thing about the time. If you are repeating something like that, if you are repeating like this, you are coming back to this, right? So if my time, I start from here, and time, second measurement I make here, no change has taken place, right? To be able to find the change, I have to break it. So my reading or time step should be smaller than this, and that is why the sizes becomes too small. Now the problem is that okay, if the sizes are small, what is the problem? Again the computer limitation. My computer cannot handle that. We are thinking in terms of 1 million cells. That is a very good size of the grid, and 1 million for a reasonable space. And what I said, for a 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter cube, you require 10 raised to the power 12 grids cell, and simultaneously you have to do stepping division in time scale also. So another you have to divide the time in less than the frequency time. So another 10 raised to the power 4 is added to it. It becomes impossible. So this is the problem. The problem is, let me repeat, you have vortices which are very small and moving very fast. To capture their motion, you have to reduce your cell size less than the size of the vortex, and time step less than the frequency of the vortex. If you do that, you can get the correct picture of what is happening. But the problem is your computer is not capable of doing it, right? So what do we do it? Okay. The same thing it is being said here, the solution formulation of these scales are not feasible with the present day computers available with us. We are not. So, and laws of turbulence, we have no equations to predict the random fluctuation in the velocity and other flow parameters which are caused by surface roughness, microscopic features of the surfaces, or microscopic behavior of the fluid. It's something like that. If you throw a glass, right, you cannot predict that where it will break, right? Each time you drop a glass, each time the pattern will be different. What is the reason? The reason is the atomic structure, or you can say the molecular structure or the grain structure, right? So what is happening is that it is the molecular structure which is determining the movement, which is determining the flow. So you have the surface roughness which you cannot account for because it is so small that you cannot, again the problem would be what? You have to make the grid size very small and you have to read the surface. Your surface is, suppose it's like this, you say my surface is like this. It's not like that, the surface is actually like this. Now if you want to, and this is creating the problem, because you do not know the type of disturbances is created, you don't know what will happen. So either you break it into smaller things so that you know the structure, which becomes you are going to the molecular level. You are not able to do it. So this is how the randomness comes in, that from the surface roughness, which is the microscopic features of this, and the microscopic behavior of the fluid. Fluid also, right? Suppose I throw a ball of water, right, and you on a, you can say, pin, each time the pattern will be different. A drop of water is falling on the ground, each time the pattern will be different. Because what will decide the pattern? The pattern will be based on the molecular structure of that ball, how it breaks. Right? So this is the problem. We don't know the laws of turbulence. So there is one problem is the computers, and the second is we don't know that what is happening, right? So what is the solution available to us is that averaging the equations. This is how the problem of turbulence is solved. You do the averaging, right? Flow over a time span, and that it means the mean flow is not varying. So we take a time interval in which the mean flow is not varying. The flow is varying, but the mean flow is not varying. Okay, and if you do that, this leads to a set of partial differential equations called Reynolds average Navier-Stokes equation, RANS. So we talk about RANS. So far we have studied about Navier-Stokes equations. Now we are going to average those equations, and so we get a new set of equations which are called RANS, Reynolds average Navier-Stokes equation. Okay. How do we do that averaging? What we do is, okay, one solution available to take care of the turbulence is to work with flow parameters averaged over time interval t star. So what we are doing is we are averaging the flow and trying to solve this. So we rewrite Navier-Stokes equation which are termed as RANS. Okay. The average of any variable over a time interval t star that is large enough as compared to the period of fluctuation is defined as. So this t star is not required finally. So it's a, you can say, imaginary, not really an imaginary number, arbitrary number. It should be, the size should be such that the average flow does not change during this time. Okay. Now if you make this average, phi is any parameter, you find the integral phi dt and divide by this from time t to t plus t star. So what you will get, a value of phi average, right? So you are studying a thing for some time, right? And during that time you will get a value which is the average value. Okay. Now what will be the instantaneous value then? You can say that phi is equal to made up of two components. This is phi bar plus phi star. Actually phi is fluctuating. In an interval, phi is average. This is the average value. This is the fluctuation. This is the real value. Okay. Now so okay, it is something like this. You draw, let us draw a curve here. This time is here t, this phi is the value here, right? And this is phi average, phi bar. This value is the phi bar, okay? And actual phi value is like this. Random. But over a period of time you will find that this is averaged. Okay. Now we are just doing some mathematics, simple mathematics. Average of phi will be phi bar, because all the fluctuations actually add up to 0. Average of phi bar will be equal to phi bar. So there are three variables. One is phi, one is phi bar, and one is phi prime. Okay, and we are finding the average of all the three. The average of phi is phi bar. The average of phi bar will be phi bar only. The average of phi prime will be equal to 0 because phi prime is fluctuation over the average. Okay. Now if you do that, you can find the velocities can be found out like this. So this is the instantaneous velocity, this is the average velocity, this is the fluctuation. And same thing you can do for all the parameters: velocity in y direction, velocity in z direction, pressure, temperature. All these parameters are fluctuating. So you have one, the fluctuation, the second is average. Okay.